What's up, guys? This is Carter Thomas with Coin Mastery TV. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and the notification bell to get notified whenever we do new videos. I'm supposed to be on jury duty this week, so tentatively speaking on the live streams, because you don't find out until every day. So make sure you're following on Twitter. That's where I will announce in 24 hours or 12 hours notice. Live stream, Twitter /Carter Thomas. Hoping to do one this week. I think that would be a lot of fun. A lot of very spirited discussion this week, I would say, on Twitter and YouTube surrounding Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. So, yeah, a live stream would probably be pretty fun. What we're talking about today is actually not going to talk too much about Bitcoin. I think everybody's gotten... Or at least I know I've gotten enough of that on Twitter. And I think it's a lot more exciting to talk about why we're all here, which is the biggest financial revolution in the history of history. So maybe that's probably what we should be talking about. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Talking about some altcoins. We're going to talk about investing mindset and strategy. We're going to talk about the CME futures, what this means in December. Talk about Mike Novogratz and what he's been doing and some interesting macro takes on his strategies. And then I want to talk a little bit about one of my own investments and the strategy behind it so that you can compare it to how you are looking at investment. I think this is really timely and really helpful for a lot of you as you compare fundamental, macro, and technical analysis in your journey. And then we're going to talk about a little piece of news that, call it a bet, but I'm going to bet on it this week, which I think you guys should all take a look at. So Bitcoin is doing its thing. It's hovering right around 6,600 right now. It's bouncing up and down, but it is what it is. I think that there's more interesting stuff to talk about today other than Bitcoin price, which is why we're going to just switch right over into Bittrex. Now, a few things have been happening on Bittrex. One, they've been listing some new coins. And what's unique about this, two are at the top, Mercury and Power Ledger. I looked into a little bit on Mercury, but it didn't have a ton of information that was super useful. But the one thing that was really interesting is the impact that Bittrex had on the overall market cap. So when you look up Mercury on CoinMarketCap, you can see that by being added to Bittrex, it was a huge boost to the overall exposure level of this particular coin. And then same with Power Ledger. Power Ledger has actually been doing really well across almost all the exchanges. It got listed on Binance and now Bittrex, and they've had a really good run. And these guys, it's the same thing. Some coins, when they get listed on Bittrex, don't do as well, and some coins do as well. And I think that one of the theses that I've always thought about is when coins are getting added to exchanges, often that is a very good way to get a very quick and fast increase in price. And I think what this is really showing us is that when there is proven demand somewhere else, but there's just not enough volume in that place, getting onto a new exchange is a very positive thing. When there is not a lot of demand somewhere else, just by putting it onto a high volume exchange like Bittrex or Binance or whatever, that can actually be a negative. So whenever you're trying to front run one of these exchange listings, realize that it's already got to it's got to have some good momentum or a good track record before it gets listed for Bittrex to really move it up. Otherwise, as you've seen with many coins that get listed on Bittrex, it can actually go the opposite way, where people can now dump all their stuff instead of new buyers accumulating it because they didn't realize it to begin with. So I think that it seems like common sense, but I think that's one big takeaway from this particular week as Bittrex has started to list more things. And I also think the other big trend that I'm seeing is a little bit more capital inflow into altcoins. And loosely speaking, this typically happens once there's some huge dopamine event, which in this case was the Bitcoin Cash weekend. People get bored, and altcoins are where the action is. And you see capital start to flowing back in. It's a pretty micro view of it, but you got to remember these altcoins are relatively tiny compared to something like Bitcoin, which is where the institutional players are at least looking, and some of them are playing in. So from everything I could find, I comb through forums and chat rooms. I talk to people. I look at the data. I look at the volumes. That seems to be an indicator of altcoins doing really well. Once you get a ton of action, there's so much dopamine that when you see a lull, people want to it's the same thing as a casino. It's literally the same psychology. And I see that happening a good amount in times like this. And so next time for you guys, next time you see some big crypto frenzy where everybody is commenting on everything and everyone has an opinion about it, once that starts to die down, kind of like what it's been doing in the last 24 hours, notice that people are just they're looking for something else to get fired up about. They're trying to get that hit again. Often altcoins is where it happens. So I think that I would keep an eye on this in that sense. That's kind of the bigger picture, as opposed to just trying to dive in here and make picks. We'll talk about Zcoin in a little bit here, why this had such a huge spike. And hopefully a bunch of you guys who are Zcoin owners have just crushed it on this thing as well. So keeping that in mind, I also think that this is an interesting way to look at uncertainty. Ari Paul, who, if you guys are not following Ari, go check him out. Ari David Paul on Twitter. He has been one of the most balanced thought leaders in the last couple months of anyone I follow on Twitter. I think that finding people like this are fresh of breath air, because he just seems to be looking at the space in a very objective way. One, because that's how you do as an investor. Two, because he's got a fiduciary responsibility to his investors where he has to look at it objectively. And I think that's something that somebody told me once that I've always tried to remember, where anytime I'm making decisions, a trade decision or an investment decision, ask yourself, would you make this same decision for somebody who gave you all their money? And if the answer is no, you gotta remove that emotional trigger. And I think Ari's done a really good job. And he tweeted, said, for most, holding all Bitcoin chains with a small allocation, or for most, holding all Bitcoin chains with small allocations to the highest quality altcoins is wise. For active traders, be patient. It's the most alpha-rich environment I've ever seen. You'll make money if you stay in the game, manage risk, focus on downside, be patient. So if you don't know alpha-rich environment, that means the alpha returns on a market. If you aggregated the entire crypto space and put an index on it, let's say the index was 100% returns a year, that is the alpha returns. What is the overall ecosystem? So he's saying, look, this thing is on a rocket ship, but there's going to be major volatility. If you're just holding on to this, that's probably the best move right now. If you're actively trading, patience is your friend. Right? And this is nothing new. It's just good to see this, because if you look through a lot of his other tweets, talks about things like Elliott waves. He talks about current trends and how this is playing out. And I thought this was really insightful. Excuse me. When a trade or an investment seems inevitable and easy, when it feels super bullish with a price grinding steadily higher, that's usually a wave 5, the last leg before a major correction. Beware of the inevitable. This is true in the short term. This is true in the long term. Anytime that you are looking at a market or a trade and you are justifying yourself that it's not a big deal because it's gonna go up. It has to go up. It's inevitable that it will go up. That's often when the markets just they wreck people. Right? It happens every time. It's happened many times in the past. And so for you guys, audit the thought process as you are looking at your trades. This is something that I've been doing, and this is why I don't pull out 10, 20, 30 different coins on Twitter or on this channel, because it's easy to get caught up in this fact, like, oh man, when they release the wallet, it's going to be, it has to go up, right? And I've learned that the more I think like that, the more the market just doesn't do well. I mean, we've been talking about this for the last week or two. And so keeping that in mind, keeping that psychology in mind, I think is really, really helpful and really important. So go check Ari out. I think that he's just a smart guy, and I really enjoy following him and hearing what he has to say and what he's thinking about. Moving along these lines, I think that from a macro standpoint, one thing I'm noticing is that we're obviously in a huge bull run. There's a massive amount of people signing up for Coinbase. There's a massive amount of people buying into Bitcoin and getting excited about it. There's a lot of people in the crypto community that are pretty close to maxing out the amount of money they can or will invest in crypto. And so we're kind of in this holding pattern, and we're waiting for the next thing to move it up, to get it to that 10,000. And the thing that the gorilla in the room is the CME futures from a news standpoint. And that seems to dominate the discussions. The news that came out, I believe it was yesterday, is that Terry Duffy, CEO of CME, they're based in Chicago, he said that you can expect this to happen, to go live in second week of December. Meaning, in December, people will have the ability to buy and sell futures on the Bitcoin market. Now, as Bitcoin holders, if you are a Bitcoin holder, immediately have a bias to think that, wow, they're all going to think like I do, and they're all going to come in here and go so long on these futures, and it's just going to be an unbelievable bullish sign, which hopefully that's what happens. But the more I've been talking about, I've been reaching out to a couple of guys I know in the hedge fund world who are not in crypto. In fact, they don't know much about crypto. And I talk to them about this, and I tell them a brief overview, and I talk about the CME futures. The first thing they say is, oh, cool, so now I can short this whole thing. They don't talk about how they're going to try to make massive amounts of money. The first thing they tell me, I mean, this is like 3 out of 3, is, oh, great. That gives me the ability not only to hedge, but to actually put a short position on Bitcoin without knowing anything else. So I'm not saying they're right or wrong. But I mean, I think that this is, I think this is kind of probably more of a clickbait title. Like, you'll be able to bet against cryptocurrency this month. But the reason I'm bringing this up is, 1, it's big news. But 2, there's a lot of people that are not bullish on crypto who want to make a lot of money on crypto. And that is a way of thinking that a lot of people that we, for the most part, myself included, have not really brought into the discussion, which is you can make a fortune when everybody else loses money, right? I mean, talk to guys like Kyle Bass or go watch The Big Short. I mean, shorting markets is an enormous business. And this is a case in point where a lot of people could make a lot of money shorting Bitcoin if it ends up going down. And I think that this is really important to think about, because over the next, let's say, given month, if you do see if you start to see a lot of people building short positions once the futures go live, what would your plan be? Would you move money into altcoins? Would you move money into Ethereum? Would you move money into fiat? Would you get into margin trading? And we'll talk about this, right? But we're all trying to figure this out at the same time, and you can just start thinking about that. But this is something that is just something that we haven't thought about yet. How could you make a couple $100 million on Bitcoin without owning Bitcoin, and two, with everybody else losing money on Bitcoin, right? So if it goes way down, all of us get totally worked, and all these short sellers just clean up, and then they come and buy all the Bitcoin. Like, it can happen. I'm not saying it will, but it could. And having some level of protection is important as it relates to CME futures. I'm not trying to be a bear here. I'm not trying to spread FUD. This is just real life. This is reality. And these guys are mercenaries when it comes to making money. So just make sure you're keeping it real. Mike Novogratz, you guys know I'm a big Mike Novogratz fan. Hedge fund manager, Fortress Investments. He is really the guy who's connecting the institutional world with Bitcoin, with the investment side of Bitcoin, loosely speaking. And what I thought was really interesting is one, or I should say, what I think is really interesting is that he came out yesterday, or article came out, and he said along the lines of, in 6 months, there's going to be some institutional products that people can start to buy, just like retail products, right? You can go on your TD Ameritrade or E-Trade account and buy crypto. And within 6 months, that's going to be available to investment firms, to retail investors, everybody. He said that's going to drive the price way up. So he's always bullish on everything. What's also really interesting is when you remember that this guy has an enormous amount of money and his reputation on the line. 2 days ago, he bought $15, $20 million worth of Bitcoin. You go back and you look at the charts. Remember how we talked about volume is the first place you always look while prices are dropping pretty fast. And you look at the volume. This is only GDAX or Coinbase. So if you look at everything, he single-handedly bought up $15-20 million worth of Bitcoin, which can translate in, that can have like a 10-20x multiplier in a market cap. Not 1-to-1 ratio, obviously. But he bought an enormous amount of Bitcoin on this dip. And with that level of buying, he may have helped drive a lot of support to keep the price up. Now, lo and behold, he comes out 2 days later and he says, oh my God, this thing is going to 10,000 institutionals coming out. This is going to be huge. I don't disagree with him. I agree with all that stuff. However, he has just upped his skin in the game. And accordingly, he is absolutely going to do what he's got to do to make Bitcoin's price go up. Right? He's going to use his PR and his connections because he just dropped $20 million in Bitcoin. Of course, he's going to go out here and tell you it's going up. I mean, that's the business. That's how he makes the money. That's how he does it. So, really interesting. And again, I don't disagree with him. I think it's great for all of us. But this guy is a hedge fund manager. CME futures, these are financial people. Money is why they're here. And they're going to do what they got to do to move the price in their favor. So keep an eye on that, because as you see this happening, they are going to try to move the price in a way that will benefit them the most. And they have the power to do it. They have the finances. They have the media reach. Now they have the financial instruments and the quasi-derivatives to make it happen. Super interesting, though, to start thinking about this kind of stuff, because it's like it's a huge version of when you go on Twitter and you see someone who promotes something, and then like it starts doing well, and they start promoting that coin so that their investment goes way up. I mean, it's like, that's what people do. So I love it. I love this. It's just such a game. Like, the whole thing is just such a game, at least on the investment side. Okay, 2 more things. Speaking of talking about coins that you own, I'm going to talk about Zcoin. And the reason why I want to talk about this is not necessarily because I own Zcoin. I've told you guys for 2 months I've been buying this for Zcoin. And I've showed you the research. I showed you why I did it. And I think that they're doing an interesting thing overall. But the Masternodes piece, which check the video, a week and a half ago, I talked about Masternodes, and Zcoin was really the one that I think had the most promise. Stratus really kind of dumped because it's just so out of reach with $250,000 to get it. But what was super interesting, or what is super interesting, is you look at Zcoin and the Masternodes info came out, I want to say yesterday afternoon, maybe last night, and they've had a huge accumulation bull run because of it. It's been relatively slow and steady. I mean, if you scroll out, it's pretty parabolic, but it's not, you can look at the volume, and the volume's relatively even. So there's a lot of holding happening, not a lot of selling, profit taking. The reason why I think this is interesting is when you, along the news or the trend that we've been talking about, when news is already baked into the price, there's not going to be a big lift off. In fact, there's often a sell off when the news comes out, right? Buy the rumor, sell the news. The difference that Zcoin did, whether it be consciously or unconsciously, is that one, they didn't tell you what date they were going to announce about the Masternode details, other than they were going to push it back because of the fork, which was a smart move. And now the fork has been delayed. They did. So we didn't know the date that they were going to announce this. 2, they didn't tell you the amount. So nobody knew how much they needed to accumulate. So all of this buy activity couldn't get baked in here, because if you knew that it was going to be 1,000 Zcoin, people would have had a very different view on the accumulation phase here. The price would have been more even and would have balanced out to whatever the final price will end up being. And then 3, they're good product, and they're doing an interesting thing with the way that they're allocating the funds and redistributing it. And it's like a 45% ROI. So they're creating great incentives from a dividend standpoint. But I think what we can learn from this is that when you have a coin or crypto that you believe in, and they have news that is going to drive some sort of buying activity, in this case, Masternodes, like the unknown of how many do I need, that is a buying decision piece of news. The more it's unknown, the more it's not baked into the price. And so Zcoin did not share that info. Shared it yesterday, and it went up like crazy. I've been accumulating this for 2 months. I'm very, very happy with this, and I'm excited to set up some Masternodes for these guys and let it rock. If you're interested, as always, I would wait for a dip. This is a little bit different because people are buying to get a Masternode. So when that dip happens, I don't know. But the point is, this will happen again with other coins. Just realize that the unknowns are what caused that jump, right? It's not the fact that it's Masternodes or whatever. It's the fact that nobody knew. So super interesting stuff, and congratulations to the Zcoin team. Excited for those guys. Last piece of news, which is an interesting rumor, I guess you should say, speculation, my weekly conspiracy theory. I guess we already really covered that with Bitcoin Cash, but we're not going to talk about that anymore. Singapore, their central banks are doing open source blockchain prototypes. What that means is Singapore Central Bank is opening up a bunch of different blockchain projects and telling people, hey, come work on this. Let's see if we can make something work. Let's see if we can really create an international payment transfer system that's going to be cheap and efficient and really whatever. It's going to be better. As we all know, the blockchain is. Now, what's interesting is that this article was also on CoinDesk, but on the CoinDesk article, it walked through a few different things. It talked about how they're integrating all these different technologies like JP Morgan's and Hyperledger and all, but it kind of stopped. But on this FinExtra article, at the very bottom, they bring in that IBM has joined the Jamboree. Now, they do that because, know your customer, which is a big deal for, obviously for banks. Now let's take a step back here. Banking and transaction and currency related stuff. What comes to mind? Ripple and Stellar Lumens. 2, who recently did a deal with IBM? Stellar Lumens. 3, who is doing a huge Asia tour and who is organizing a meetup in Singapore this week and who is doing tons of big announcements in Southeast Asia? Stellar Lumens. Do I have any proof of this? No. Are there a lot of signs pointing to something big happening with that? Potentially. But this is a really good way where you can take one piece of news, dig in, go and find other pieces of news, start putting pieces together, start to look at the different coins and see if you can get in the head of the team. See if you can imagine yourself in the room of a deal happening. And how can you slowly start to put these together? So, it could be Ethereum, could be Ripple, could be whatever. But I'm betting on Stellar. Literally buying Stellar. So full transparency on that. So we'll see what happens. But this is the kind of stuff I love. This is the kind of stuff that I find this is what's going to make the big money for you. And I think the final thing that I'm going to wrap up with, which is something that hopefully will help you, a lot of you guys, especially as it relates to Zcoin. One of the other big reasons why I wanted to bring this up is that I think a lot of us look at trades and we look at our decision making on a very short window. Like if you get information and you don't see the profits coming in 24 to 48 hours, it's a lost cause, and you don't think it has any merit. Right? The recency bias. That's like when you ask someone what's the best book they've ever read. 80% of the time they're going to tell you a book they read in the last 3 months. That's what people do, right? So as you are making your bets, right, you're creating your investment strategy, realize that the only way to own enough of a coin to make a ton of money relative to how much you own, like your overall trading stack, is you got to accumulate over the long term. There's no doubt that technical trading can make you consistent money if you do it really well. So if you want to get a 10-20% rip over and over and over, and you have really amazing technical analysis skills, or you follow someone who does, or you join their group or whatever, that is a way to slowly make some money. But when you want to make big money, you have to accumulate over a long term. And so what I would encourage you guys to think about, and Ari kind of alluded to this, so to speak, is that if you are going to be a holder, you look at this as just like an accumulation phase, and you have a very strong thesis for why you are accumulating some event or something that will skyrocket the price, right? If you knew about Stellar Lumens a couple months ago, or Ripple, or whoever this is going to be, and you could accumulate, that's how you can get enough coin to make real money, right? Because no one's going to trade with 50% of their funds. The risk reward of that just doesn't work out. So what I would tell anybody, and I do tell people this, you trade for consistent income, assuming you're good, which is easier said than done. And you use fundamental macro to make big income, like once in a while, but huge, big returns, because you have the time and ability to accumulate large sums. So you bake that into your overall strategy, and that's how it works out. So with that, I'll wrap this up. Hopefully I shouldn't say hopefully, civic duty. I will obviously go to jury duty if I get called, but for Coin Mastery TV and podcast, I'm hoping I don't have to wake up at 5 a.m. to shoot these. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace out.